6 planes, 6 crews, 1 daring challenge. Fly from England to Australia in 30 days. The prize? A fortune. The risk? Their lives. By the end of this race, planes would be scattered across jungles, orchards, and oceans. Engines would fail, maps would go missing, and for some, the cost would be their lives. This is the story of the Great Air Race of 1919. Being just 16 years after the Wright brothers first flew at Kitty Hawk, aviation was still dangerous, experimental, and unpredictable. Planes weren't built for endurance. They were fragile machines, prone to mechanical failures, and pilots took their lives into their hands every time they flew. But after World War I, countries around the globe began to see aviation as more than just a tool of war. The Australian government had a bold idea. They wanted to connect their country to the rest of the world by air. To prove it was possible, they offered a £10,000 prize, equivalent to over $800,000 today, to the first Australians to fly from Great Britain to Darwin in under 30 days. It was a challenge that would test endurance, ingenuity, and raw courage. And for many who tried, it would end in disaster. Engines failed without warning, storms could knock you out of the sky, and navigation? Forget GPS, you were lucky if your paper map didn't blow out of the cockpit. The rules were simple. 1, the plane had to be built in the British Empire. 2, the crew had to be Australian nationals. 3, they had to pass through designated checkpoints in Egypt and Singapore. 4, and most importantly, they had to arrive in Darwin, Australia by December 31st, 1920. It was May 1919 when the challenge was announced, giving the teams a year and a half to prepare and take flight. Teams could depart on different dates, but victory would go to the crew with the fastest overall journey. It sounded impossible, yet 6 brave teams took on the challenge, piloting aircraft designed for short domestic flights rather than marathons over oceans, deserts, and mountains. The first to take off on October 21st, 1919 was the Sopwith Wallaby, piloted by George Matthews and Tom Kay. They struggled with engine issues and even imprisonment in a foreign country, only to crash in Bali 6 months later. The Alliance P-2, flown by Roger Douglas and Leslie Ross, didn't even make it out of England. They crashed into an orchard, killing both men. The Blackburn Kangaroo braved storms and mechanical issues before crash landing, but amazingly, the whole crew survived. The Martinsyde Type A, carrying Cedric Howell and George Fraser, disappeared near Greece. Howell's body washed ashore days later along with the wreckage, but Fraser was never found. And then there was the Airco DH-9. It did manage to reach Darwin, but unfortunately after 206 grueling days, well past the deadline. Although they did receive a consolation prize of £1,000 for their efforts. Ultimately, only one team was victorious, the crew of the Vickers Vimy bomber. On November 12, 1919, brothers Ross and Keith Smith, along with mechanics James Bennett and Wally Shears, took off from Hounslow Heath Airfield in London aboard their Vickers Vimy plane. This wasn't a luxury aircraft, it was a relic of World War I, an open cockpit plane designed for short bombing runs, not cross-continental journeys. From the moment they took off, the odds were stacked against them. The late fall weather was brutal. Freezing winds, rain, and poor visibility plagued their journey. With no roof to shield them, they relied on sheepskin boots and fur gloves to survive the cold. Their route stretched 18,000 kilometers, taking them over Europe, the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. While stopped in Indonesia, disaster nearly struck. The Vimy sank into the mud, making it impossible to take off. Locals rushed to help, laying bamboo mats to create a makeshift runway. It was a crude solution, but it worked, so they pressed on. Finally, after 28 grueling days, they touched down in Darwin, Australia on December 10, 1919. Exhausted but triumphant, they had achieved the impossible. The crew of the Vickers Vimy returned to Australia as national heroes. Ross and Keith Smith, along with mechanics Bennett and Shears, shared the £10,000 prize and were knighted for their achievement. A few months later, they flew the Vimy back home to Adelaide, where thousands of people gathered to cheer their arrival, proud to have these courageous men come from their very own town. Among the photos of the celebrations, one picture stood out to me. It seems like just a regular snapshot of the crew standing proudly in front of City Hall. But look closer. Do you see it? I guess he wanted to be memorialized in this historic event as well. The first photobomber alongside the first flight from England to Australia. Today, their plane remains on display at Adelaide Airport, a reminder of their courage, ingenuity, and determination. But this was more than just a victory. The Great Air Race proved that long-distance flight wasn't a fantasy, it was the future. It paved the way for the global aviation network we rely on today. So would you have risked it all for $10,000? You'd be risking your life in an open cockpit plane, exposed to the elements, navigating with nothing but a paper map, and risking engine failure at every turn. For some, the reward was worth it. For others, the cost was their lives. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy unpacking the past, stick around. This next true story will make you lock your windows at night.